welcome back to the Human Challenge, where we explore all of the human challenges in today's world, the challenges of being human, and how we can challenge ourselves to be more human for the greater good. I'm your host, Vanessa Ferlaino, and today we are joined by Jackie Lamoureux, CEO and founder of Summits for Serotonin. Welcome to the show, Jackie. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I see your lovely plant in the background, and I know that
Yes,
you are in Alberta right now, right?
correct.
Is there a lot of
Yes.
snow right now?
Actually, we're having a shockingly nice fall in Edmonton. We've got no snow on the ground yet, which is very uncommon. And it's been like hovering slightly above zero all fall. So rolling with the sunshine this year. It's pretty cool.
I appreciate that you're in December and you're like, yeah, it's a warm fall. That it's December
Yeah.
1st.
Well, it's because,
I
we don't normally get fall. It usually goes from summer straight to winter. So I'm like
I
riding the waves.
I know that's what I mean. Like I appreciate that. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm in Northern Ontario right now, and it is not
Okay.
fall here. It is not fall here. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You guys have lots more humidity for snow, so awesome.
Um, well, I'm really glad that you still got all your nice weather and that you're getting to ride that wave a little bit. And I'm sure, I imagine for summits for serotonin, it must be a really great thing because of all the work you do. I know what I love the most, you have this one phrase, providing more accessible mental health care for everyone. And I
Yes.
think that's amazing. And I know that you do a lot of that outdoors. So I'm sure the fall weather is very supportive of that. Tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us, like your journey, kind of how that led to Summits for Serotonin, and then this idea of accessible mental health care.
For sure. So I guess I'll start I'll roll back a few years ago. So by trade, I am a personal trainer. And I have always really struggled with my mental health, but I never really became aware of what that really looked like or meant, or that how I was feeling wasn't necessarily considered normal, or that healing from that was really an option for me until I would say probably around like 2018. Um, and so really where the project was inspired or was inspired from was through the pandemic. As a personal trainer, I think most people know gyms were closed, and it kind of took away all of my income, which also I think the isolation from everybody and all the other things that came along with the pandemic, really, I was kind of hitting a rock bottom for me. And I also suffered, a loss of a friend from just like a tragic accident. And then through the pandemic, I felt helpless because I didn't have any resources here in Alberta at the time of the pandemic. The going rate for counseling was $200 an hour. It's now up to $220 an hour here, and that's just not, you know, a it's just not accessible. Most people can't afford to spend $200 on a lot of things, let alone an hour with a counselor. So I was actually very fortunate because my mom works in healthcare, so she has a, a long laundry list of resources for people who are in my situation, and she connected me with a charity and counseling service called Cornerstone Counseling, and so they provide subsidized healthcare or counseling services and mental health care services for people who don't necessarily have the funding to pay full price for services. So I was able to get connected with a student counselor for as low as $20 an hour, um, which made a huge difference. I was able to connect with a counselor, have online counseling sessions, and kind of work through all the things I was feeling. And so then fast forward to I'm back working, and I'm on my feet again. I'm feeling a lot better mentally and emotionally. And so actually on my birthday, it would have been my 27th birthday, I kind of had this aha moment that I'm like, I'm in a place now where I feel like I can maybe make a small difference. And I was inspired to start the nonprofit with the aim of breaking down barriers around accessible mental health care. And so the very first thing I did was connect with Cornerstone and said, hey, I'm going to start this nonprofit, and we want right now for you guys to be the recipient of some of the money that we raise and some of our funds. Because for me, obviously, that was a very personal connection, and it meant a lot to me what they did for me, and what they do helps a lot of people around all of northern Alberta. And so that's kind of really where the whole thing started from. And then that was 2 years ago, so February of 2022. So we're coming up on our second year anniversary right away here.
That's awesome. Congrats.
But yeah, that's kind of really what motivated the start of the nonprofit.
And I definitely really hear that story a lot. I mean, I just think in general from the pandemic, the mental health question was a really big one that came up, I think, for everybody. So I imagine that being very relatable. And then so I guess so you've partnered and you're raising funds. And so how is one of the ways you do that? I think that when I was looking into this, there's like mental health retreats, and I know there's a big connection here between like human connection with each other and then with nature, right? And so
Yeah.
how does all that fit into, because I think that's lovely from like a being human perspective, right? Like it is about
Yeah.
ourselves, each other, and to the world, and nature is such a big part of that. So how do you do that or bring those things together through your nonprofit?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that we offer through the nonprofit, and so from kind of the more raising money side, I actually went and got certified with the Outdoor Council of Canada. So I've been in love with the mountains for years. When I really hit that rock bottom 5 or 6 years ago, I was like living out of the back of my car in trailhead parking lots through Banff and Canmore, and just climbing mountains because, I'd experiences, like I mentioned, I lost a friend, and there was that, metaphor of the higher on the mountaintop, the closer I felt to those people that I've lost in my life. Um, so with that, like that really helped on my healing journey, and I really wanted to connect that with people. And one of the ways that I also connect most with people is around a campfire. And I kind of was like playing with the idea, how can I bring this to people who need it? How can I the outdoors are not as accessible as you may think. It might be right out the front door, but to go into the backcountry and to really submerge yourself in nature, it's expensive between all the gear, knowing what to do, how to manage wildlife. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And so I basically I offer for corporate settings. We have paid retreats that we could take teams on, and then with that money, we're able to donate to Cornerstone Counseling, and also run free backcountry mental health retreats that are really tailored towards, connecting with people and understanding that you're not the only one struggling. And there's another, physical component of that is like, it's not easy to climb a mountain, but what mountains allow us to do is to see that like we're capable of a lot more than we think we are. We're strong and we're resilient and we're able to overcome things. And I really wanted to connect all of those things that I felt, and offer them to people who maybe don't have access to the things I have access to, or the resources that I have. And I wanted to create that resource for people. Yeah, so I try and
Yeah,
take people into the backcountry and let them heal.
right. Yeah, I really love that. One of the things that you said that really spoke to me was climbing the top of the mountain made you feel a little closer to some of those people that you had lost. And it actually, what came up for me was I lost my father quite a few years ago now to brain cancer, and we actually, one of his last wishes was to just go to Mexico. We have family there, and it was just something that he just wanted, and he passed there. But we rented a little apartment space that actually overlooked two volcanoes that surround the city, and they're connected, and they're very beautiful. And I always felt that every time too, like that there's something with that, like that sturdiness of like the mountains and volcanoes, right? It's like, just even just
Yeah.
waking up and seeing them, there's just something about it that just kind of like brings you home. You feel that presence, and I remember finding so much comfort in just those volcanoes, like the way they just, it's like they have this presence and they're there. Sometimes it felt like they were like holding up the sky, you know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah, I
and
totally know what you mean.
enough, you could just kind of look out and be like, oh, like there is peace,
Yeah,
there's, it was, yeah,
exactly.
it
And
was
it's
so, like,
almost like the knowing of like there's so much more. For me, like when I'm in the mountains or looking at mountains or on the top of the mountain, it just like it reminds me there's so much beauty and so much more than the negative and the challenges that I'm facing. And I always like to use the term mental mountains, like everybody has a different mental mountain that they're facing. And as mentioned, there's tons of parallels between the climbing of an actual mountain and overcoming a lot of the hardships. And I'm really sorry to hear about your dad, by the way. That's like a horrible way to lose somebody. Um,
thank you.
so
Oh no, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's healing, to always just talk about it. I'm pretty comfortable with the discussion. I like talking about it. I think because it's a way to honor that, a way to honor him, a way to honor, that whole experience. But thank you. I do appreciate that. I
yeah,
I think it's also too one of the things that what you're saying also is making me think of this idea of oneness, right? Like this idea of like, looking out and seeing nature is like, there's so much more beauty out there. And I think that there's that idea of the oneness, that connection, right? That it's
yeah,
like that, I don't know, that's what I experience when I'm kind of out in nature, is that like I am part of nature, I am part of this world. I'm like embedded into the world in a way. I think, you know what I mean, as human beings, like we are embedded into this physical world.
yeah,
And I think that is one of the things that I really appreciate about nature. And then, what I love a lot about what you do, because it's just that extension, I think, of mental health, right? It's like mental health, accessibility, and then that total sense of oneness, right, with ourselves, each other, and the rest of the world. And I think it's really, really beautiful.
absolutely. I really love what you said about, being open to sharing about and having, comfort in the conversations about talking about the things that have happened in your life. I think a lot of people, um, there's maybe some shame around feeling bad or, grieving and processing these things that happen to us, and I want to, in these retreats that we run and in allowing people to have access to a therapist, opening the door for those conversations in a safe space with people who have no judgment and understanding is like super important to breaking down the stigmas around mental health, because holding it in is not good. Like that's where we really start to kind of spiral into a downward cycle with our mental health. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when I reflect, I remember for myself, I had a very similar experience to you, where everything kind of crashes down. In one moment, I have had a phase where, I'm also living out of my car, and um, it's a lot. There's a lot kind of happening around. You don't really know what to do. And then I remember for me, there's this feeling of like, am I allowed to talk about this, right? Like, am I allowed, or do I have to keep pretending that everything is fine, right? And I think kind of to your
yeah,
point about the shame part, right? That it's like, am I allowed to talk about how I'm feeling right now, or do I need to like keep pretending everything is okay? Am I allowed to even feel this sadness, or am I supposed to just like be positive and look on the bright side? And
yeah,
I think that's in society that I think really should be revisited. How are we encouraging people just to have open conversations? Like, why is it taboo to talk about my mental health? Why is it so
yeah,
uncomfortable? So
yeah,
I think,
exactly. And I guess I'm not sure, maybe I should put a trigger warning, but especially on like the conversations of suicide, because suicide rates are quite high right now. And I think it's such a shame. I've been personally in a spot where I've had, a couple times in my life where I've battled with suicidal thoughts, and going to try and keep it together here. But like, it's a really very lonely and dark place to be. And I think really what pulls me out of that is like having, it's really hard, but to have the courage to, tell someone that you love that you're really not doing well, and like verbalizing that kind of gives you perspective in a way, instead of running with all the negative thoughts of yourself in your head. And you're right, there is a lot of taboo around talking about mental health, and we live in a really fast paced and productive society. And, you know, I think we feel this pressure that if we're not feeling good and we're not feeling productive, then we need to like keep that to ourselves. And we need to always be moving forward. And I think that's just not the case. What's more important than any of that stuff is like living a full and like amazing life. And also, I really, with all that I'm doing, I want people to know that like, just because maybe right now you're in like this dark pit of a space, it's not impossible for you to, put a little bit of work into yourself and like to get to the other side of that and have like these amazing experiences and this amazing life and accomplish these crazy goals, that you maybe didn't think at one time you'd be capable of. Because I've done a lot of really cool things at this point that 5 years ago, you know I never even considered an option for me. I never thought I'd be able to do what I do now. I never thought I'd be able to go some of the places I've been and climb some of the mountains I've climbed and help some of the people that I've hopefully helped, along the way. And there is recovery and healing for everybody out there. So that's really one of the messages I want people to know is like, it's hard, but those hard things make you so much stronger, and it makes the recovery side of that so much sweeter because you get such a appreciation for what you have.
Right. No, I appreciate that a lot, and I really thank you for being so open about that experience. I completely, I completely hold space for that, and I'm very grateful for your willingness to share that experience. I know that those are very challenging things. I've gone through some very challenging things myself, you know, and like so, for example, I was sexually assaulted when I was 23, I think, and I mean it's the trauma part, right? And I think that when we deal with even things like suicidal thoughts, it's not just mental health, there's a trauma component to it, right? Because
Yeah,
it's traumatic, right? Like I think when you kind of catch yourself in those moments and you're like, whoa, like did I think that? Like that there's a bit of a trauma response in there. And then I think circling back to earlier where it was like, am I allowed to feel that? Am I allowed to talk about it? But I did it, and I appreciate your point too of the ability to create that space in being able to talk about it, right? Like when because you're right, like it is hard to talk to people about it, to be able to say, this is my experience, this has been my reality for a while. And it's hard because, I know for myself, for example, in the case of sexual assault, there's so many times you try to talk to people about it and they kind of, and they accidentally blame you for it. They don't realize that's what they're doing. Most people just get uncomfortable and they don't know how to be supportive, but they accidentally
yeah,
kind of blame you for it. And you're like, well, okay, like that's not supportive, but I'll take this elsewhere. But that's the thing. I think a lot of people don't acknowledge or understand that it is, to get to that point of being able to talk about it is very, very challenging. And
yeah,
at the same time, there is that release that comes from that. Being able to talk about it creates that space inside, so it's like, okay, I can like kind of figure, or I can just let it move through the body, essentially. I think, and that's kind
yeah,
of the best way that I would describing it.
yeah. Instead of it feeling, trapped, you just kind of have
Yeah.
to go through the motions. Acceptance is maybe not the right word, but it is also at the same time maybe the right word, because we do have to accept the things that have happened to us, and it's really up to us to determine how we let those things affect us. And I think, with the whole theme of the podcast, the human challenges, I think every single person can relate to having to accept things that have happened to them, or maybe even things that they've done that they're not necessarily the most proud of. You just have to take all of those, um, and accept and learn and try and, you know, keep moving forward, and understanding that, what has happened to us and what we've done doesn't necessarily always define us. And that like I said, there's always healing as an option.
No, Absolutely. I love that part. Like, the things that we do not define who we are. You know what I mean? I think that's crucial because, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I'm going to just like leave it there at that sentence. Like, the things that we do
Yeah,
not equate to people that we are. Done.
exactly.
Um, yeah, love that so much. Love that so, so, so much. And I think extending off of your ideas and thoughts around acceptance, what I have sort of come to in my own journey is this idea of acceptance. To me, is just the acceptance of all these parts of me, these pieces of me, the trauma part of me, the happy part of me, the frustrated part of me, the
Yeah,
rebel part of me, like
yeah,
it's the acceptance of, like, acceptance of the inner child, right? And her
yeah,
insecurity. Like, that to me is acceptance. This acceptance of just, I accept all these parts of me, and they find a way to coexist in this body, and I honor it for what it is, right? Instead of that shutting down of, oh, inner child, like, you're so insecure right now. But it's like, no, you just need to have your space right now. You need to be heard. Your stuff's going to come out, and we just allow for it, and honor it. And I think that that's been how I've sort of worked through acceptance, right? That it's like, whatever's here is present, and it will pass.
yeah, for sure. And like one of the things too about the mental health thing is it's not linear. So like my personal experience and your personal experience on how we've dealt with our traumas and how we've dealt with our challenges, it's not necessarily always going to be the exact same roadmap for the next person. Um, and I just really want to like create a community of understanding for that, mental health healing is not a linear aspect. Everybody's going to have a different path. Everybody's faced different things and is able to process them in different ways. And I just want people to understand that and create like a more compassionate community, really. I think we've lost some compassion. I'm not sure where it started or necessarily where that ends, but I'm really focused on creating safe spaces and a safe community for these people who are struggling. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And that's part of my healing process, giving back. It's really rewarding and it gives me the feeling of having purpose in my life. And I think it's important for people to have purpose. So
Right.
that's kind of,
No, I hear that completely. Um, Creating space, and I think creating space is also something that, we create that space within, and that sort of creates that space around us, right? Um,
yeah.
and I think too, this piece of compassion, I think it's funny, this, I don't know where it started, and it's like, it's true, because it just sort of becomes, right? I think all of that stuff is already there, right? It's just sort of hidden behind the traumas, the
Yeah.
mental health, the conditioning, the this and the that. And like, once taking that time and that space to just understand it, dive deeper, look past all that, and then as you start healing, that real stuff, the compassion, the love, the openness is always there, right? It's just, who we are is more of just a shedding process than anything else, right? Like, I think sometimes we treat it like this philosophical question, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't need to like ask 100,000 questions about like the could be's or the what ifs. It's more like what's inside right now and what's underneath all of these kind of surface layer things, right?
Yeah. For sure. Um, yeah. Sorry, I'm just at a loss of words. I'm just kind of thinking about all of the like ways that like it's just such a mental health is just so complex and I got to be honest, my head always is running with all these concepts of where, we need to improve in our society right now. And my wheels are just kind of turning through this conversation on like it's motivating for me on different ways that like I can approach this in my retreats and how to guide conversations in the retreats, and kind of who I should be connecting with in our community that can maybe help like breaking down these barriers. So I apologize. I'm kind of at a loss of words because my wheels are just turning right now. Um,
No, 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 don't apologize. I think that's great. Like, that's the way, that's the process, right? It's like the wheels are turning, and then tomorrow morning it'll be like, okay, time to like act, and that's just kind of the way
yeah,
it works. No, 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 like, don't even worry about it. That's really No, I love it. I think that the one thing I want to add I want to talk about the Grand Slam coming up. But the one thing I want to add is this idea of what we have to do in society is that, is we're so obsessed with like wanting to feel good, right? Like think about like
Yeah.
mindfulness. Everything's like so commoditized, but it's like that's not real, right? Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing in the workplace. Like we identify a healthy work culture as like one that's always celebrating and it's like, but that's not real. And I think that's the problem, right? Like we don't actually create like the realness. Like even let's
Yeah.
talk about spirituality. Like I'm a certified mindfulness meditation guide, and I'm a very spiritual person. And spirituality is not about like being fluffy all the time, right? Like don't get me wrong, I'm like, yeah, everything's magic, like yeah, totally. But it's about being grounded in reality, and if you even look at things like chakras, like if you're a balanced chakra system, right, like it's like
Yeah.
you're connected but you're grounded in your root, you are still like grounded in reality, right? And I think
Yeah.
a big misconception, I think sometimes in society, is that we are like wired to like, oh, we gotta feel good and we gotta like reach for something to feel good, but that's not real. I think
I
maybe that's the perspective, and maybe that's something your brain will be worrying and going, and maybe something to work with for you.
Yeah, no, honestly, I totally agree. I think that you're 100% right in saying that like being happy all the time is not real. And I think that's maybe one of the areas that society is misstepping and thinking that we just have to be positive all the time. And maybe the way to create these, healthy work environments, healthy relationships, and healthy communities is again allowing that space for the times that we're not positive and all right, and like that has to be okay, not just for you, but kind of everybody needs to be accepting, we've all been down, and like we can't shame someone for going through something or make them feel like it's not a space. And we live in a very very in Western culture, we live in a very corporate world. And that kind of ends up trickling, I think, has kind of trickled into every aspect of our life, where we have to have like this very corporate structure, good process, make more money, keep going. But I think it's also okay to be, happy with where you're at and not feeling, bad about feeling bad sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think sometimes, I think too, when we're, quote unquote, like happy all the time, it actually really devalues happiness, right? Like it devalues the truth of happiness, and it also devalues like the not happiness stuff, right? The crunchy stuff, the tender stuff, like all of those things are part of the human experience. That's part of being human, right?
Yes.
Like, you
Yeah,
can't actually experience happiness without experiencing anything else. You can't experience joy without experiencing not joy. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
it's
I
just that's
totally
reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's just the society's kind of strayed away from that. But I think, I've also seen huge movements. I mean, there's been a huge movement for the mental health side of the world. And I think that that compassion and that space for all of that, and to be like, you always hear it's okay not to be okay. And I think people are that's really starting to actually sit with people, and people are, moving back in a really positive direction, and reconnecting with each other. And, you know, I think there has been a lot of progress made, but we're still kind of living in a situation where there's still lots of work that needs to be done in regarding to accepting that we're all human. We're all just having the human experience. We're facing different things every day. You don't know what the person in traffic next to you is going through, or, you know, the poor person on the corner to the rich person in the Bugatti. Like, you don't know what they're going through or what they're feeling or how the things are making them feel. And even though it's not your situation, I think we've come a long way in reducing the judgment in people's circumstances versus how they feel. And that makes me, really happy to see. And I just want to continue seeing that like forward progression in the mental health space. So,
Absolutely. And I think maybe just in the spirit of, we're talking about human experience, human challenge. I know you've got a big experience coming up, the Explorers Grand Slam Challenge.
yes.
Tell me about this. You were telling me about it before, and I was like, wait, pause. I want to be on record when I hear this so that my facial
Yeah.
expressions be real. So please share with us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's actually already starting to take place. So for people who don't know what an Explorers Grand Slam Challenge, just to divulge a little bit more, I am like an avid mountaineer, and it's one of the things that have really brought me healing, is being in the mountains. And I have a personal goal right now of doing the Explorers Grand Slam. So that's climbing the highest mountain on every single continent, as well as traveling by foot to the North and South Pole. So far, I've actually already completed two of the mountains, both actually this year. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so I've done quite a bit of traveling this year, which has been, awesome for me. And that's kind of like, these are the things I'm saying, when I was talking about, I didn't even realize certain things were possible or what I was capable of. But I successfully in January climbed Aconcagua. It's a mountain in Argentina. It's the highest mountain actually in the Western Hemisphere, and the highest mountain in the world outside of the Himalaya, which is in the Nepal Tibet range where Everest sits. Everest is on the list of those mountains. It is the highest mountain in Asia, so I'm really like nervous but excited for that one. And then I actually just got back in September. I summited Kilimanjaro, which is the highest peak. Um, Yeah, and that one was really cool for me too because my boyfriend and my cousin Paige, my boyfriend Cole, they actually came with me, and neither of which I would say is, nearly into mountaineering as much as me. They maybe between the two of them have like 5 or 10 nights in the backcountry total. And it was actually a really cool experience for me because rather than being the one experiencing, the overcoming and the resiliency, I got to watch them go through that in their own capacity and watch them develop these tools and see how much like they're capable of bringing on. And like for me, that was just like the coolest thing, to watch people, grow on these mountains the way that I feel like I've grown on these mountains and to share that with them. So that was really cool for me.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. And so
yeah.
how long is it supposed to take? Is there like a record? Are you trying to break a record?
So there, I am trying to break a record. So if I complete this in a timely manner, I would be the first Canadian woman to ever accomplish an Explorers Grand Slam. Yes. With that being said, though, for me, the timeline and the goal of being the first, like that is not the most important thing for me. I really, I want to focus a lot of my time on the retreats and building up the nonprofit to what it is. And also, climbing these mountains are quite expensive. So I'd be lying if I said there's not like a financial side of that, that I'm trying to overcome myself. And it's very important to me that none of the money we raise through the nonprofit, although I'm using it to raise awareness for what I'm trying to do with the nonprofit, and I'm trying, I've connected the two in a way. It's still my personal goal, and I want to make sure that none of the money that I can be using for raising money for the accessible mental health care or for the retreats, I don't want any of that to go towards my personal expeditions. So I'm not actually totally sure what the timeline is going to look like. Um, I'm doing it as fast as I can safely. I want to come home from these expeditions. They're not, I think we maybe I'll know that, Everest, for example, isn't always safe. I'll be spending, 2 months in Antarctica when I go down there, a month in the Arctic. I'll be traveling to some really remote and dangerous places in order to even access some of these mountains. There's a lot of risks. And I want to make sure, my passion really lies with this nonprofit. And I want to make sure I'm healthy and safe enough when I'm coming to come back from these mountains and continue on what my main goal is. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. And I've learned so much about myself. And every time I go on one of my expeditions, I'm just so much more motivated. And I have to say that, like, it's the thought of the change I'm trying to make. And like, I think about, little girls in their teens who are like me and like really struggling with depression and how I could maybe help one or two of those girls or somebody who's battling that, like, lights a fire in me that I swear that's what gets me to the top almost every single time. Um, but yeah, I'm like super excited about it. I'm really proud of myself. That's something I like never used to really actually be able to say. But it's been a really cool experience so far. And yeah, so I don't know when my next expedition is. I'm hoping this time next year. But like I said, that's not at the end of the day my number one goal. And if it takes 10 years, it might take 10 years, it might take 5. I don't know. But we're going to
Wow.
try.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, just congratulations to you just for even like, taking that on. I think that's amazing. And I mean, I think you're right. Who cares the time? It's like it's the experience, it's the journey, and I think that's incredible. Thank you so much, Jackie, for coming on the show, and thank you for the very real conversation, a very authentic discussion, very, very appreciative. Love all the perspectives about, the human experience and how we can work in society to maybe create different spaces for things like mental health and personal journeys. And I wish you the absolute best of luck in the Explorers Grand Slam Challenge. I will be
Thank
following
you.
you. I will be
Thanks.
watching this. And yeah, just thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for the awesome conversation.